I'm talking with Richard Earl today from the famous Earl family. Hi, Richard. Why don't you tell us who you are?
Hi, Oliver. First off, thanks for getting me here. I'm excited to talk about this. I've been researching Harley Earl's story for the last 10, 15 years, and he was the man for the first time who introduced the automotive world to the design of cars, the automotive design profession. And by the end of his career, in the late 50s, he was pretty much known in the American auto industry as the man who invented the car design profession in America.
That's great. We spoke on the phone briefly last week, and you brought up this fascinating point, which will be in the blog post I'm writing to go with this, which is the analogy with Steve Jobs and Apple, who just had this blazing 10 years really of incredible innovation. And a lot of people think that's kind of unique in American history in a sense, or in global branding history. But of course, Harley Earl, and you're an auto historian, so you know more than pretty well anybody about this. Really invented the annual product cycle, and way back when, you can tell us about this, it's fascinating to me, was basically the person that invented the whole concept of an annual refresh of styling, and people were actually really looking forward to the next year of General Motors cars, particularly in the 1950s. I mean, he invented so much of that business cycle and made GM fabulously wealthy back then. Can you just flesh that out a bit?
Absolutely, that's a great lead in. Thank you. And really, what Harley did, he was the first individual to open the door for the individuals in the 20s when the cars were all pretty much cracker boxes on wheels, and of course we all remember the Model T. And he offered General Motors, basically gave them an offer, or they couldn't refuse. And he designed cars for movie stars and millionaires, being from Hollywood, and he designed them out of a clay model, full size first, and then show it to a potential client. And right away, if there were changes, he could do them really quick. But the point is this new technology, which was math-based, he showed it to General Motors and said, look, the cars I can have coming off of your assembly lines can be like the ones I do for the movie stars and millionaires. And, it was an offer they couldn't refuse, because they realized that the world was changing, and appearance was becoming much more important, and he was a real aesthetic engineer. And what took him and General Motors into the future is that he really started the automobile design profession inside this car company, and then of course all the other car companies started to have a vice president of design, just like Harley Earl founded the idea inside General Motors.
Yeah, and it's hard to overstate how important Harley Earl is in so many areas of American business in the last century, really. I mean, the influence he had. I mean, I know Steve Jobs was very heavily influenced by a lot of design companies, and so I think the German design school he was very interested in, Steve Jobs. But there's a lot of curious analogies here, really, that Steve Jobs has gone now unhappily, and Apple have noticeably lost their luster. And in a way, Apple packaged fairly generic technology in a very attractive way and kind of transcended the old PC market as was, and of course blazed a huge trail with the iPhone.
Right.
There's an analogy here that Harley Earl did this incredible stuff with the big events that he put on, and the incredible vehicles that travelled the country and really the globe. So can we just talk about that a little bit, kind of what Harley Earl did above and beyond styling to actually really kind of energize the whole space of automobile styling and sales, really?
Well, it's a great way to get into it. I like to tell people, Harley, invented this paradigm, and it was appearance and function were of parallel importance. And Steve Jobs and his team, Ives and the other great designers at Apple, they really got on board, and the iPhone and the introduction of this new system, and it really took the company into the stratosphere, and everybody else followed, raising that standard. But really, it's interesting because it's a business model, and it's like they tore the pages from the Harley Earl playbook, and those, of course, are the annual styling model change, and he was the first to really perfect this this business model in the business world. And of course, he did it in the biggest sector of business, which was the automotive industry back in the, approaching the mid 20th century. And then, of course, after the 1950 mark, the 50s were really kind of just an absolute perfect scenario of what Apple was experiencing for their company in the last 6 years. And it's just exciting because it's very similar. And I'm going to make a comparison because I think it's interesting what you said about the Apple versus the PC market. The PC market, they don't care about its aesthetics as much, or the appearance and function being of parallel importance. And with that in mind, they often lag behind as far as in getting people really excited. I mean, you know what it's like going to an Apple store. I'm sitting here talking to you on a PC, but it's like every day at an Apple store is like the day after Christmas almost, because excitement and people having a really pleasurable time most of the time. And I'd say that's pretty much what a GM dealership was back in the 50s.
Yeah, that's well put. Yeah, and just the futuristic design. There's all the aviation influences and so on that Harley Earl got into. This is fascinating stuff. Talk a little bit about the actual events, because Steve Jobs basically, was always a genius at selling and pitching the product to huge global audiences online. But back in the 50s, as you say, which was kind of the sort of the glory days of Harley Earl's design, there was huge events and huge touring road shows. And so there's a great sense of style above and beyond the actual physical cars and the concept cars that Harley Earl would put up as being what was coming next.
It really was. The Motorama was a precursor of the modern auto show that we all enjoy. And to really define what that means is, I'm sure if there were statistics done today globally regarding the international auto shows, and if they found out why do people come to the auto shows, I think the numbers, the stats would be pretty high, approaching 50% of individuals, mainly men, wanting to come and see the futuristic concept cars. And what's of course so fascinating about Harley is that he's the father of this other business calling or paradigm is of course the concept car, the father of the concept car. And of course the Y job is famously associated and not even arguable. I think most astute car people today understand that the Y job, which was the 1938 Y job, is considered the first concept car. And then in the 50s, after the war, Harley brought us 38 other design from his, he designed them along with his elite team at GM Styling. And these cars were just, had so much sizzle. And again, getting back to Steve Jobs, Harley offered, and the Corvette's a perfect example, because he brought us this car. He's the creator, founder, and it's like he offered, just like Jobs offered us products we didn't know about, and then once we had them, we couldn't live without them. Yeah. That's what Harley Earl did, and it was so great. And GM was, of course, on a meteoric rise and was the largest company in the world for the longest period of time in the 20th century.
Yeah, you can argue that their fall from grace coincided with that lack of focus and understanding of the importance of what Harley Earl had been doing for them.
Well, of course, they're never going to want to talk about that, and I'm not saying that disrespectfully. I love General Motors and what they're doing now. I think potentially the company has an opportunity to rise from the ashes. They have an incredible heritage, and of course much of that is based on design. And people, again, getting back to Harley, who he is, some people call him the Frank Lloyd Wright of the auto industry. He really is I call him the modern master. Henry Ford was the old master. And he did so much. The people following in his footsteps at General Motors, it's interesting, as Harley Earl went, into the end of the 20th century, so went General Motors. And unfortunately, that was down. But I think now with the restructuring and all the new leadership in the company, they're really, and more importantly, perhaps, is that we live in a new world, and the communications is completely different. To be able to do what we're doing now, 10 years ago didn't exist. YouTube didn't even exist 10 years ago. I just think it's all, it's really starting to happen. I think Harley's story's on the rise, and that's important because he's such a good role model. And it's all, he was, and he wasn't pigeonholed. I think that's the most important thing about this individual. He was an engineer, an artist. He was a hell of a salesman. These types of individuals are needed again in the auto industry, whether it's
in any industry, really. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. It's fascinating.